Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Jonathan Cox, a popular board game YouTuber residing in the California Bay Area. 5 years ago, John began making video reviews, which evolved into what is now a full-time job, creating board game tutorials on his YouTube channel, Jon Gets Games. John, welcome to the Binge. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it is great to have you on. Our apologies to everybody that tuned in last week. We had John scheduled last week. We attempted to get the technology working. There was a massive storm here in central Canada, which knocked at the internet in a lot of the smaller communities, especially the one that I'm in. And we just couldn't get the feed to work. And for a guy that cranks out the quality videos that you see John do, I thought, you know what, this is a disservice to John. We got to reschedule this, get a clean internet connection, and get a good recording. So thank you for your patience and in coming back, John. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
So let's start off. You have roughly 32,000 subscribers. I think you're like a couple hundred shy of that.
Yeah,
that's a huge number.
Yeah. I mean, it's a funny thing about numbers. They tend to grow.
Yeah, I guess they do. Well, even since last week, I think you're up like another 1,000. So, can you just start off by taking us through how did you get into this in the first place? Like, what were you doing before this? Is this something you've always done, or kind of how did you click in? I know you've been doing the channel for about 5 years, but how did this all kind of come together?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you a very long, boring story, but the short version of it is that my previous career, I guess I can say that now, was in the event industry, and I specialized in managing large crews, installing large lighting rigs, and lots of big generators that could power whole cities, that kind of stuff. And I worked a lot of nights, and I worked a lot of weekends, and I did not work a lot of like Mondays and Tuesdays at all. So I would oftentimes be incredibly bored on a Tuesday afternoon or something like that. And I was like that for years. I mean, I started Jon Gets Games in April of 2014. So it's actually over 6 years now. Math is hard.
Okay.
But at that point, I was already like 5 or 6 years deep into that industry. So I was pretty used to it. But I just remember, Rado is the reason I started a channel, because I was backing his Kickstarter campaign for his annual drive thing. And I remember reading his blurb thing on the page, and it said, back in 2011, I pulled out my phone and I recorded my first video, and the rest is history. And I remember it was like a Tuesday in April of 2014. And I was like, I am so bored and I have a phone in my pocket. If Rado just pulled out his phone and started, like, why the heck can't I? So I literally did that. I was so bored, I just pulled my phone out and I recorded a review impromptu for a game that I loved. I'd played over 30 times. It was a game called Taluva. So I had a lot of thoughts about it. And I came up with the name Jon Gets Games almost instantly, because actually my online kind of handle in a couple of ways was called Jon Gets Bored, because I would get so bored. Honestly. Like, I have a whole YouTube channel called Jon Gets Bored,
Nice.
full of be doing things trying to not be bored, like skydiving and racing cars and stuff like that.
Wow.
And a lot of people are like, why did you call this one Jon Gets Bored, B-O-A-R-D? And I thought, because I don't know, it just didn't sound very good. So Jon Gets Games kind of came out of the ether, and I just kind of ran with it. I gave it about 10 seconds thought, not realizing that it was going to dominate my life and end up being the name for my entire career. It's funny how tiny little decisions can have massive ramifications. So yeah, I just, kind of started because I was bored, and I kept doing it because I was bored. And also I found it, satisfying.
Yeah. And so starting off, like, when I went back in history and kind of rolled back the clock to kind of the beginning of your YouTube channel, I could see that you still had, thousands of views, even on those first kind of few videos. What did you do to start building up that base? Were you doing any kind of advertising? Did you just kind of get lucky with picking the right games you reviewed, or what did you go about? Like, how did you go about getting, some of that initial audience built up?
Well, I mean, the short answer is persistence. The more nuanced answer is that I think a lot of those videos, like especially the early ones that have, thousands of views, that's because they're 6 years old. I was not getting thousands of views when I first started this thing out. I vaguely remember being, for the first time one of my videos got more than 100 views. That was a pretty big deal, and it was a while. I can't remember. It was many months, and I remember being so excited when I hit 100 subscribers many months in. Back when I started this thing off. I mean, the when it comes to like what I did, like I said, perseverance is essentially the key. Like, you do something long enough and you do it okay enough, then the numbers tend to go up. I've never really had any hockey stick shaped growth by any means. It's been kind of slow and steady, like the turtle the whole way through. I never really did any advertising. The only advertising I've technically ever done is at the start of 2018. That's when I officially went part-time with this job. Now, before that, this was just a hobby that I started charging for things in 2017. So for about a year, it was still just like a hobby that made a very small amount of money, and I had a full-time job. And in January of 2018, I talked to my other job, the career I'd been in for 9 years at that point. And I said, hey, I officially want to go down to 50% time so that I can dedicate 50% of my time to this. And I ran a big pledge drive for my Patreon campaign at that point. I made, ribbons and all that kind of stuff. And I actually took out some advertising on Board Game Geek for a month to go along with it. So that's the only advertising I've ever done. And that was, again, in January of 2018 when I was already math, almost 4 years in.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I just, make the video and I post it on BGG. Board Game Geek is an incredible resource in a lot of ways. I feel like as a hobby, we are very lucky to have something like Board Game Geek.
Yeah.
It's the website. I know there are lots of other websites that try to be relevant, and some of them are more than others, but realistically, the elephant in the room is always Board Game Geek. Everyone goes there. It's essentially a wiki type website, where you just put your own stuff in. It's the Board Game Wikipedia. And we can just post our stuff there. I have a friend who's made music for like 20 years, and he's got a SoundCloud and he's got all these things, and he's made like 20, albums and that kind of stuff that unfortunately almost no one listens to. And he's told me before, he's like really jealous. He's like, you started doing this random thing, a creative project, and it's like taking off and you're making money at it. I wish that would work for me and my music. And I was like, well, there's no Board Game Geek for music.
Yeah.
There's lots of websites, there's SoundCloud and whatnot, but like, most other hobbies are much more diffuse than this one is. So yeah, I put the videos up, and if I was, some travel blogger, or if I was, I cooked things in my kitchen or something, I just putting it up on YouTube and hoping that YouTube's algorithm would help me out. Whereas in the early days, I think Board Game Geek was the vast majority of the push to get people to actually watch my stuff, because it was a content funnel. Essentially, people cared about the game, a new video pops up, they're curious to see what it is, and then that helped YouTube think I was relevant. And these days, the majority of the people getting pushed to my stuff is not actually BGG. I think I can't remember the exact amount. It's somewhere between 10 and 20% of my views come in through BGG. If maybe it's a little lower than that now, but anyway, that's changed over time. But realistically, making videos for 6 years straight.
I think some of that growth, the organic growth as well, comes with being linked into, Kickstarter pages. So for instance,
sure.
We interviewed Jeff LaFlamme from the Dungeon Decorators a few weeks back. And in preparation for that interview, I wanted to really truly understand the game. If you're going to interview somebody, you obviously want to understand their game.
Right.
And so when I was looking at his Kickstarter page, of course, I go to the tutorial, right, to try to understand how to play it.
Yeah.
And it was your tutorial that was on there. And when I was, watching the tutorial, I was like, wow, number one, the audio is great, because sometimes you get these tutorials where it's great that they're using their camera, but maybe they're using just the ambient microphone, which isn't always great to listen to. Your audio was clean. The description was pretty clear on the different, because I had some questions on like how, for instance, King Domino, right? So when you play King Domino, how you choose order of domino going into the next round. I thought that was kind of how their tile choosing worked, but I wasn't really clear. But when I was watching your video, I'm like, okay, now it's crystal clear on how this works. So that pulled me into Jon Gets Games, and which kind of generated me reaching out to you saying, hey, let's get on the podcast, because I think you got a really great channel here. And I think that's what people kind of seek out, right? They seek out a place where they can find good content. And then once they subscribe, then that content's going to keep coming to them, right? And they may then suggest that to other people as well. What percentage of your business now would you say, Kickstarter based, where you have, publishers reaching out to you saying, hey, can you help us with our Kickstarter by doing a video?
Well, what do you mean by business? You mean like just
Like
percentage of videos?
your video creation, yeah, your content creation. So and when you go through your YouTube page, there is a
A
ton
lot
of
of
videos.
Kickstarters. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
what percentage of those are Kickstarters is kind of where I'm getting at.
probably on the order of 80 to 90
Okay.
percent, if I'm being honest. It's something I've been trying to work down a little bit. Like I'm starting to work with
Yeah.
some publishers who are working with me for a lot of their published games that they just, publish straight to the market. I
Hmm.
like being able to scout those around. But I mean, if I'm being honest, people publishers spend money to market their Kickstarters. Like Kickstarters are they're an event, to try and
Yeah.
sell this thing really quick. And the standard older way of selling board games was, you release it to the public and you have your press release and you try to have sales and you try to drum up some interest. But it's just a lot different than the kind of focusing of eyeballs that Kickstarter can do. So people are much more interested in spending money to make
Yeah.
that Kickstarter campaign successful. And this is a business. This is now my entire full-time job. So,
Wow.
I have to kind of go with where the money is. So I try to cover, games that are interesting. I try not to, I get many requests for games that I don't think are that interesting to me, and so I decline. Occasionally I'll say yes and I'll get a game and I'll realize it's not quite what I thought it might be, but
Mm,
I do the best I can,
sure.
because it's a job. And I'm trying to inform people as best I can. I mean, I've been doing this for, whatever the math is again, since early 2014. And I have not been making tutorials since 2014. Like my channel has changed drastically over time. Like I said, I started, just filming a review with my iPhone. I wasn't on screen at all and I didn't have a microphone at all. I just used my iPhone's microphone. And the first couple videos were like that. And
Yeah.
every video that I made for the first, I think like 8 or so months was just reviews. Right from the get-go, I was trying to make reviews of a style that I felt like I wasn't seeing. I essentially wanted to see the reviews that I wanted to watch. I was like, okay, I'll make them. But over time, I started making playthroughs. And I remember, I think the very first Kickstarter video I made, one of the first certainly, was a game called Shadow Throne. And that's because a friend of mine, like a real life friend of mine who lives in the Bay Area, named Teal Fristo, he was the designer of it. And he asked me to make a video. He knew I had a YouTube page that had, probably less than 1,000 subscribers at that point. And I said, sure, I'll make you a video because you're my friend. So I made the video for that one. I made another video for another one of his games called Birds of a Feather. And I just
Okay.
kind of trickled with those over time. Publishers started reaching out, asking me to cover their games for Kickstarter. And I said yes, because, content. And, I didn't charge for years for these things that came in. And eventually in, like I said, 2017, I finally got up the gumption to start asking for money to do these things. And, these days they're tutorials. They're not even full playthroughs. I try to make them feel like you're playing the game
Yeah.
while I'm going through the tutorial, but I stop. I don't play through the whole game anymore because
Yeah.
for a wide variety of reasons. But the core idea that I'm trying to get to is that things change and that's good. And, I have this great studio and I've got awesome lighting and awesome audio and everything, but
Yeah.
that is super not how this started. That was an incremental, thing over the years.
I think that, if people have short attention spans like I do, being able to have a video tutorial that you can kind of skim through quickly to the important parts is pretty good. I think, I mean, your model's isn't a foreign model, right? Most content creators, especially if they have a subscriber base, are going to charge for that service. And I mean, you're paying for the quality, you're paying to help fund, great sound equipment, great lighting, and the time that goes into it. And I'm going to speak to the time that goes into it in a second, but with 32,000 subscribers. So my message out to anybody out there who's a publisher, designer, anybody looking to do maybe Kickstarter, and they're thinking, hey, why would I pay to have a tutorial? I could probably just create that tutorial myself. Not only are you getting the quality with that, having a third person describe the game, which they're going to be able to come at it from a very different point of view of
Right.
someone who's too close to it, but the subscriber base. So you got to think, right? So, Jon's got roughly 32,000 subscribers. All those people are opted in. So every time he launches a new video, they get pinged saying, hey, there's a new video up by Jon, right? So you're not
To a
just
certain
paying,
extent.
right? But the quality, you're not just paying for the creation of the video. You're also getting an audience that comes with that as built in, right? That you wouldn't necessarily be able to tap into if you hadn't done it through this particular channel.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I mean, there's no getting around that. But with the subscriber mechanism on YouTube,
Mhm.
you have to actually click that silly little bell in order to
Yeah.
actually get like pinged when a thing happens.
Right.
And I can tell you that like 5% of the people who subscribe to my channel have clicked that little bell. I think it's because I don't tell people to, because I feel like, why would I tell people to make their phone alert when I make a new video? That just feels
Yeah.
weird. But you have to, when you look at your subscription feed, you see all these things. And I will say that that is definitely a factor to publishers, who are paying to have me make the videos. But what I really try to push back essentially with
Mhm.
is that I am trying to make marketing content essentially for these games. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be disingenuous. I want the game to show itself off, but
Yeah.
I kind of want the subscriber base to be secondary. I want to make a video that they want to put in front of other people. Like,
Sure.
here is a thing, you paid for a thing, here's a thing. Go on and use my thing to help sell your game. And oh, by the way, yes, there's 31,000 people who are potentially going to watch it.
Which doesn't hurt.
It doesn't, but I mean, I say potentially, that's a big potentially. I mean, I could tell you from my experience that, the vast majority of those people don't watch every one of my videos.
Well, they're not going to watch every one, but I mean, like, I think most people, when you have, because I have a number of channels I'm subscribed to across board
Yeah.
games, tech, sci-fi, Star Wars, things like that. When I go on YouTube, I don't just go in blind and say, today I'm just going to start browsing YouTube and just see what pops up. I go to my
Right.
subscription feed first and I start looking at all the videos coming out from the channels that I've subscribed to. So even if I haven't clicked that bell, you're still going to get a chunk of people that, as they're scrolling, they may still see that, even if they don't play it. Just the thumbnail alone is advertising, right? So
yeah, it is. And I think one
Yeah.
of the analytics that YouTube gives you is the number of impressions that you get, like the number of times one of your videos has been presented to somebody else as a suggestion, or I think also as a subscription. And then it also tells you like your conversion rate of how many times people actually click on that thing when it actually pops up. So yeah, I mean, all these things matter. But I guess what I'm trying to get at from a practical perspective is
Mhm.
like from a real number perspective, I have 31,000 subscribers right now, which is awesome.
Nearly
but,
32.
Nearly 32. But I've published videos in the last couple of months that after a couple of days have not cracked 1,000 views because there's just no hype for those games already.
Yeah.
Me creating the video feeds into making some hype for the game, hypothetically. But if I make a video for a game that everyone's talking about already, boom, I'm gonna have 3,000-4,000 views like crazy. If it's a video for a game that's not getting a lot of hype, or a smaller scale Kickstarter that still wanted to go with me, I feel bad. I feel bad because I'm like, I wish everyone would watch it. I think this, whatever game it is I'm talking about, by definition, if I'm recording a video for it, I'm saying I think it's worth some of your time to take a look at it. But
Sure.
people scroll through their massive list of all these subscribing channels they subscribe to, and they're like, oh, I've heard of that, click, and they're like, oh, I haven't heard of that before. They just pass on it. So there's a pretty sizable difference, like sometimes even 4x as many views for a game that people already know about versus a game that isn't big. And like I said, 31,000 subscribers, and it still could take a full week to crack 1,000 views.
Of course.
Even though I've been, so it's it's nuanced.
So let's talk about the process, right? Because I
Yeah.
think when a lot of people watch a video, they think, wow, that's easy. I mean, he sets his camera up in front of his backdrop, pulls out the game and just starts playing it and recording himself talking about, how to kind of set up
Making
the board
moves.
and how to make the moves and so forth. But it is more complex. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily appreciate the amount of work it goes into creating content. Can you walk us through your process from start?
Sure.
Right? So when a client says, okay, you come to agreement, you're going to create a video from a client, the process you go through from when that starts through to the end, what are the steps and how much time is involved in that start to finish process?
Yeah, I mean, it varies a bit from project to project, but in general, they say yes, and then they ship me a prototype, usually a prototype, because most of the videos I do are Kickstarters, but
Sure.
they ship me a version of the game. When I get it and when I'm ready to actually film it, I will bust it out on the table and I'll read through the rules and try to figure out how it works. More often than not, I will have questions, so I write all those up into a notepad and then I shoot those off. So I actually usually try to do that first wave of trying to learn the game a day or two before I actually want to film, because not all publishers respond super quickly.
Yeah.
I've definitely had projects stall out for a week or two before because I'm just not getting an email back explaining, these questions that I have. But once I get to that point, I mean, right there, that alone usually takes, depending on the game, between 1 and 3 hours. If it's a really complex game, it can be hard. Also, and I'm not going to name names, but like, I have had many videos, many prototypes show up for a pretty meaty, like medium to heavyweight game with lots of stuff going on.
Mhm.
And I have a text Word document for the rules, like not a single image inside the entire thing, like a 40-page Word document.
Oh, yeah.
And that's going to be 3 hours of me just going through process of elimination, being like, figuring out which types of cards are what by counting them and being like, okay, there's
Yeah.
65 of these, so therefore this is a scheme card or whatever, But
It's like, man, I wish I had a video that could actually walk me through this.
yeah, right. Sometimes I do. I have been known to watch other people's videos if other people have made videos first,
Nice.
because why not?
Yeah, exactly. So you get to
but
learn the
yeah.
game, so you understand how to kind of the rules of how to play.
Yeah.
Then you sit down, and then you start. So one question that kind of came up was, I was looking through some of these videos. Are you recording while you're doing those hand actions, or do you record the audio separate from the actual hand actions and then pair them up?
Yeah, it happens at the same time.
Okay.
Believe it or not, it would be probably an order of magnitude harder to do it separate.
Yeah.
It's way better just record everything at the same time, sync it up in Final Cut Pro, and then go from there. I mean, I do technically record it in two different ways. I have a recording device over here. You can see it's a Zoom H4n Pro. I've had this for years.
Mhm.
So that records me, what I'm saying in a microphone, and then the camera is recording audio. And then in Final Cut Pro, I just click the little merge button and it merges them together. So I get the good audio and I get the good video.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sit down and I, play the game out, make sure it's ready. And depending on the game, I might just jump in and just start going for it. And sometimes if it's a more complex game, I spend some time kind of planning out what each of the players will do. I've usually 3 players in my games. 2 are dummy players and 1 is us. The collective
Sure.
us playing it. And if it's a really complicated game with like 12 main actions, I don't want to find myself like 4 rounds in and realize I just haven't even covered a third of the actions yet because I just haven't got around to it. So I will sometimes spend a decent amount of time, depending on the game, like even up to like 2 to 3 hours, figuring out this person does this, and that's going to give them these resources, and this person does that. This person does a third thing that's different. Now it's this person's turn again, and because they got the stuff from doing the first action, now it's legally possible for them to do this next thing. If I was just doing an instructional video, like something like that's on the Watch It Played channel, for instance, you just mock up an example and teach the thing, and you mock up a new example and teach the thing. I've set myself a little bit of a hurdle in that I'm trying to play legally while actually getting to everything, while actually teaching everything. And sometimes a decent amount of work goes into making sure that happens. But I can tell you right now that I just, like literally half an hour ago, finished filming a tutorial playthrough for Castles of Tuscany. And that is a simpler game overall. And I did no planning in that one. I just started playing. There's 8 different actions in that one. And I kind of just felt confident that I would get around to talking about all of them in a reasonable amount of time, and I think that did happen. Whereas a game like Merv, the tutorial I did for Merv, I think that was close to 3 hours planning out every single the first and second actions for all the players because of all the crazy interconnectedness that happens. So it really varies. I'm trying to get to all of the teaching moments as quickly as possible and as organically as possible.
Yeah.
And I certainly cheat off screen, off camera a significant amount sometimes to actually get there, stacking decks, rolling dice until I get the die roll that I'm looking for. But I don't think people are expecting this to be totally legit.
So doing the math on this, you're looking at what then 8 to 10 hours from start to finish by the time you do the learning, the filming, the editing, going back over the edit to make sure everything is clean, sending the client back of like, you're looking at what, 10, 12 hours per video?
Yeah, these days I think I'm averaging around 10. Back before September, I was doing full playthroughs. Like I played through the entire game, and those averaged more like 15, with some serious outliers. Like Frosthaven took like 27 hours, I think. that was a beast. But yeah, these days it's now that I'm not playing through the entire game, I'm just focusing on the teaching bit. It's around 10 hours. These things add up. The editing process, it's multiple waves. I sit down at my computer and I have, maybe like 5 hours of raw video that's all synced up, and I'll just go through and I chop out all of the dead space. I look at the waveform, I see my little voice going up and down, and everywhere I'm not talking, I just cut out with the blade tool, and then I delete all that stuff. And then I come back through and I watch the whole thing. And then once that's done, I send it to the publisher to check it to see if I made mistakes. And then when they tell me the mistakes, I edit it. I record new audio and splice that in, and sometimes put things on screen. And then I'll edit it one more time, adding all the timestamps and introduction and images and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot. It takes a while. Like, there's a lot of steps to it.
Yeah. So when people, and so I always say this to people, I talk to them about content creation, when you're wondering, like, why is there a cost associated with that? Think of any other job or any other thing that you might do as a career where you're an expert in a certain field and you get hired for a day and a half to go and work on a certain job on a site somewhere. Like, what would you charge? You're going to charge for that, obviously, right? So I think sometimes we're so used to having kind of that phone at our hip and, shooting a quick little video here and there. I don't think people necessarily appreciate the amount of work and time and effort that goes into kind of creating these things. And I think people need to be compensated, appropriately. So, and it comes through in the quality of your work. I mean, these videos are excellent. Yeah. You do such an amazing job.
Thanks.
So what would you say is kind of the key learning for other content creators out there? So if there's someone out there looking to get into content creation, not necessarily mimicking exactly what you do, but if they're looking at just doing some kind of content creation, what are some tips you would give them for starting out in this industry?
I've mentioned this before in other ways, but I'll say it again. I mean, I essentially have two tips. One is physical and one is mental. The physical tip is don't spend a bunch of money at the start. Like I said, my first many videos were actually, I could say for the first at least 2 years, I've recorded everything with my iPhone. At one point I got a better iPhone, so the camera got a little bit better. And I think, a few months in, I bought a microphone, a little lapel microphone that would fit right here, and actually plugged it into an iPad that I would shove behind my pants behind me so you wouldn't see me on screen. And that was recording the audio separately. So this is before I spent, I don't remember, a couple $100 buying this audio recorder. I just used what I had. I had an iPhone. I happened to have an iPad. So I bought an $80 microphone several months in and utilized the things that I had. But before that, the first few months, I spent $0. And I think that's what you should do. Like, from a mechanical, stuff perspective, don't invest money until you really want to do it. And that leads me to the other tip that I've definitely mentioned to people before. And that is that you have to constantly be honest with yourself and constantly check in with yourself about if you want to keep doing it. And that's kind of blunt, but most people, I think, start this on a whim for the most part. And just because you started on a whim does not mean you are writing a contract in blood that you're making this kind of content for the rest of your days, or any content at all. For instance, with me, I had a heart-to-heart with myself in years ago now. I can't even remember dates, but about 2 or 3 years ago, where I realized that I hated making reviews. And that's what I started with. That was my very first thing that I did, was making reviews. And I'd made, I think, a couple hundred of them at this point. And I put so much time and effort into them. But every time I made a review, that was a bad day. And I was like, what makes one day a bad day and the next day a good day? I'm like, every bad day is a day I made a review. It just brought me down. It made game nights less fun because I felt forced to play certain games over and over again. And I just felt bad because I would be very critical in my reviews. And I would oftentimes point out things that I perceived to be legitimate flaws in games. And it felt silly to me, honestly, because it was like, I don't know the exact analogy, but the closing the barn doors after the horses have left, or, that kind of thing. Like, the game's published. Like, if I think there's a flaw with it and I yell it to the world, well, it's not going to fix the game. It's just going to tell people not to buy it. And I guess some people like that. Some people do, but I always, I want to make the game better. And so, at that point, I realized I wanted to stop making reviews and I wanted to focus on making tutorials, and I want to focus on getting into the industry more, to the point where maybe I could get into a development type role where I could actually help make board games better before they click the publish button. And that's taken many years, but it's slowly starting to kind of happen. But I had to check in with myself and realize I wanted to stop doing that. Just this year in August, I checked in with myself and I was like, what are my bad days? My bad days are when I spend 8 hours recording the extended video for some game,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do it anymore. It's like like they got stubborn. I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I know a lot of people love it. That's why a lot of people love it, and I felt like if I stopped doing it, then everyone would leave me. Um, Honestly, I mean, not like I had like a condition about it, but in my head, I felt like this is my brand. Like every playthrough I've ever made has been a full playthrough. I can't not make a full playthrough. That's not what I do. And I realized, well, of course I can. I did not write a contract in blood that said every playthrough will be a full playthrough for the rest of my days. So I
Sure.
made the change. And, my Patreon campaign took a very big hit. My subscriber count slowed a decent bit for a while, but, then it kind of bounces back up and everything's fine. And people are, I think, largely getting used to it. Sometimes people still, say they wish I did full playthroughs. And honestly, I kind of do too. I liked playing the whole game. I liked seeing where it went. I just didn't like investing the extra, 7 to 18 extra hours that extended playthrough could take. So I always say long story short, but it's never short.
Even hard drive space too, right? I don't think people appreciate that, but I mean,
Yeah.
the amount of gigabytes of space you need to hold
Yeah.
like a 2-hour video is insane. Right?
I had a 2 terabyte external hard drive that was holding all of my videos, and I ran out of space about 8 months ago. So I actually had to get a program that could recrunch all of my videos, squeeze them out into a slightly different codec that was about 20% the size, losing, keeping about 90% of the quality. And then I deleted all the originals just because I ran out of space, like you said, it takes up space and I don't want to lose them, but
so what would be the if you were to pick kind of the idea of all the videos you do? This is a question actually from Mike who's listening in the lobby here.
Yeah.
If you were to pick one type of video, what would be your preferred? Is it short playthroughs, short tutorials? Obviously, reviews. You just said is the bane of your existence, so we won't get into reviews.
That might be an overstatement, but yeah.
What's the ideal video for you?
Honestly, my favorite videos are the live Q&As.
Oh, there you go.
Because, just sit here and talk to people. So, they don't take that much work.
And that leads into your podcast as well, right? So you're doing a podcast a couple times a month as well. And a lot of your Q&As kind of I think it fed into that as well, right? It becomes
the podcast has no exclusive content. I essentially, it was a goal for a certain level of the Patreon campaign that I would spend extra time every time I made a vlog to actually export it as a podcast. So the podcast feed is just audio versions of the vlogs that I put out.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of extra work to actually put those things out, but they're identical. But yeah, I mean, vlogs are fun, right? You're just sitting here talking about games. The impressions vlogs, I quite like doing those usually, although sometimes I get anxious about it if I have some opinion that I feel like might be, contentious, or if I have, not the best things to say. I want to make sure that I can articulate that well, but then I sit here and I turn the camera on and I just kind of ramble for, about 10 minutes on each. It just kind of happens.
So there's a couple of people in the lobby. We got a lot of people actually in the lobby asking questions. One of them I think is kind of funny is they're asking, what is these circles behind you on your wall? So people listening, there's all this kind of pattern of circles kind of bolted to the wall behind Jon as part of his background. You'll see it if you go to Jon Gets Games, his YouTube channel. You'll see this wall. What is that? Is that CDs? Is that wood? What is that?
It's wood. It's wood. So actually, long story short, I'll try to make it short, I promise. Last year, I did a very big show. The event company that I used to work for, because of course COVID kind of killed everything, it catered to the 0.1% of the San Francisco Bay Area. So I've done a lot of billionaires' weddings and billionaires' 50-year-old birthday parties with concerts with big name people that you've heard of, but I've signed NDAs. But I did a big show last year, and one thing that we oftentimes do is we actually install can lights into wooden things to make a temporary structure look like it's real. So we did a show last September where I measured out and cut out, I don't know, about 1,000 of these things, many, like 800-900. I mean, I've probably cut out holes for close to 10,000 can lights over my 10-year tenure at this company. But either way, these are just the holes that we cut out to install little can lights to make a fancy looking cocktail area for a wedding. And I was, picking them up off the construction site, putting them in a bin. I was taking them out to the trash bin. And I just looked down, I was like, these things look so cool. It's like harvested barnwood or something like that. And I just walked to my car and I put them in the back of my car instead. And I had them for a while. And I ended up deciding I wanted to work them into a backdrop, because before that, for years, I've had this gray curtain that I bought like 5 or 6 years ago because it was cheap on Amazon.
Sure.
And that was fine, but it's not very interesting. And so for a very long time, I was wanting to do something else. And this ended up being the thing that I decided to do. And I went through a lot of iterations, and I'm already talking about this a lot. But yeah, it's the scrap wood from an event. I showed this to my bosses, and they got a big kick out of it because they knew exactly what it was immediately.
That's cool. So if someone wants to, like a publisher or developer, reach out to you because they like the quality of your games, your like your tutorials and so forth. And again, go to Jon Gets Games on YouTube. You'll find his channel. It's an awesome channel. Lots of great quality in there. If someone sees what they like, they love it, and they want to see their game on your table and you describing their game and how they play their game, how best do they reach out to you?
The best way to reach out to me for pretty much anything is just email me. It's jongetsgames@gmail.com. Pretty simple. There's a contact page on jongetsgames.com as well. So that also displays this kind of options.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Jon, goes by so quick. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. And thank you so much for agreeing to reschedule. I know we had a hiccup last week, but that was awesome. To anybody listening, I want to just wish our American friends a happy Thanksgiving. I know that it's about a month later than it was in Canada, but I know we got a lot of people getting ready for their Christmas, or sorry, not their Christmas, their Thanksgiving holidays this week, and visiting friends and family. And I'm sure board games are going to be coming out this week at many tables across America. So once again, thanks for coming on the podcast. You take care.
You too. Thanks.
Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.